My father, Bert Mills, started his railroading career in England during World War II. He came to Canada in 1948 and hired on with the CPR in Vancouver. When the diesels came along to replace the steam locomotives, he was displaced because of the reduced crew needs. While on the CPR, Dad worked out of the Drake Street Roundhouse in Vancouver, which is now the Roundhouse Community Centre. He was told about a job in Squamish on the Pacific Great Eastern Railway. Where was that, he asked. The CPR crew dispatcher says, you have to take a boat, and you catch it at the foot of Carroll Street. It's called the Union Steamship, and that will take you there. The Pacific Great Eastern Railway went from nowhere to nowhere before the 1950s, with ends at Squamish and Quesnel. The line opened up to Prince George in 1952 and North Vancouver in 1956. Dad found the Union Steamship dock for the first time in July 1954 and made the long journey to Squamish. The trip up Howe Sound included stops at Britannia, Woodfibre, and eventually at Squamish. Dad took his trusty camera and slide film everywhere he went and captured most of what was going on around him at the time. This is the Lady Cynthia at the dock at Squamish. Dad is standing on the rail barge dock, which was right beside the passenger dock. Before the rail line went to North Vancouver in 1956, this is where the rail cars were unloaded and loaded from the rail barges. There was a train schedule, but it was governed more by the tides, as that is when the barges could dock and the switch crews could load and unload the cars. When Dad arrived at Squamish, he was met by one of the PGE employees who would show him around. Here is a view of downtown Squamish from the top of the Chief in 1955. Here is another view from the top of the Chief just after the line to North Vancouver was completed, showing the new sawmill to the center left and the new curling rink to the bottom right. The trip from the dock to the offices downtown and the shops in the main yard was a long way, and the PGE had their own transportation, which was the four-wheeled rail bus that operated by the shop machinist Ed Aldridge. This little four-wheeler was nicknamed Sparky. Coming to Squamish was like taking a step back in time with its wooden sidewalks and dirt roads. In this picture to the right are the PGE main offices, and to the left are the company houses, which are where the brew pub is today. The phone operator was on duty only during the day, and if you wanted to make a late night call, you had to call her up at home, get her to go to the office and make your call for an extra charge. And everybody was on party lines. There were only a few streetlights back then, and they were not automatic. Someone went around in the evening and turned them all on, in the morning turned them all off again. If the baluster, a light bulb, was going bad, it would interfere with the CBC radio signal. And to fix this, you would just go out and turn off the streetlight, and your signal would be nice and clear again. This is a shot looking north down Cleveland Avenue from the top floor of the Newport Hotel in April 1955. Cleveland Avenue was named after Arthur Cleveland, who was one of the surveyors of the town site for the PGE. He later went on to become Vancouver Waterworks manager, and Cleveland Dam is named after him. The Newport burned down in 1957 and was replaced by the Chieftain Hotel, which was completed in 1958. The first tenant in the corner was Fenton Jewelers. Doug Fenton was also the watchmaker for the railway and set all the watches for the employees. Here is Dad's watch card, which he was using in 1958 when the store was started. On the back there were spaces to record the date of how far out the watch was when set to the master clock in the timekeeper's office. This is the Squamish Hotel as it looked in 1958. It still exists today and one of the oldest buildings in downtown Squamish. This is Masheter School. This is currently where the parking lot is for Howe Sound. This shot was taken just before the school was torn down in the 1970s. You can see the B-wing of Howe Sound in the background. The original train station was at the end of Main Street, along what we now know as Loggers Lane. The Bud cars were ordered just before the completion of the line to North Vancouver in 1956, and did use this station in the very beginning of their service. The railway's offices were behind the station before the move to Vancouver on Pender Street. This is the telegraph office. This is a rare overhead shot of the Squamish shops when the new diesel shop was opened in the 1960s. Dad lived in the bunkhouse, which was near here, and this is where he started his daily routine. This is a photo of Dad taken in the bunkhouse in 1954. He was reading a book about model trains and dreaming about building a model railway in his spare time. The photo was taken by Hugh Campbell, who would be the engineer to drive the first train from Squamish to North Vancouver. The roundhouse was repair central for the steam locomotives and later the diesels. This is where Dad would go to start his shift, pick up his locomotives when taking a train to points north. Before the line was completed to North Vancouver, trains started their journey on the Squamish dock after picking up passengers from the Union steamship. The next stop was downtown at the main station, then the North Yards, then Manquam, Brackendale, and the many points north along the line. The railway maintained an amazing fleet of both new and used steam locomotives. The shop crews, being isolated, could repair anything that went wrong, and nothing was thrown away because it could get used again. The opening of the line to Prince George and North Vancouver brought lots more business to the railway. New diesel locomotives were ordered to replace the steam locomotives. Some of this traffic included whole trains with just one cargo which had never been seen before, like this one carrying pipe to the northern gas fields. Logging and forestry products were what got the railway started. Here is a view of the train called the Logger, which picked up log cars from the various logging operations along the line. The PGE never bought that much that was new because they could not afford it. This is a great example. It's an old streetcar that was made into a coach. The first new passenger equipment the railway bought were the Bud cars in 1956. Here we see the Bud cars crossing the original Manquam River Bridge right after their purchase in 1956. The main yard was called the North Yard, and the yard where the Royal Hudson once parked was called the South Yard. This is mainly because of the tides. When you were unloading cars from the barge in a quick-moving tide, it took too long to bring the cars all the way up to the North Yard and go back down again. The South Yard was closer, and the crews could get their job done faster and easier. Between 1954 and 1956, the line from North Vancouver to Squamish was completed. This is a view of the Manquam Blind Channel Bridge under construction. Part of the construction south of town included the draining of Indian Lake, which was in the hollow right below the current Totem Hall. This is a view of the new line right behind where Save-On Foods is now, looking south. This was called Castle's Crossing because a railway employee, Jack Castle, lived right next to the tracks here. This is a view of the new line just south of town by the old Elaho logging shop. Dad and his mother bought a trailer and rented some land near the shops on Government Road and lived there for several years. In 1963, Dad married Mom, and they bought a new house in the Garibaldi Estates for $19,600. The second and third generations still live here almost 60 years later. Dad retired early due to health reasons after making almost 2,900 trips up and down the line. I have to thank him for being a great note-taker. These notes have been invaluable in telling the story. This is his logbook of his trips as an engineer on the railway. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed a look at Squamish in the 1950s.